Hello, welcome to another episode, the first episode of the Horror Vision Presents That's Not Fucking Horror. That's right, kids. We are going to do a show periodically where we can talk about whatever the fuck we want, and we're going to take the criticism right out of your mouth up front by calling it That's Not Fucking Horror, because it's not. Neither of these movies are horror, but goddamn, I love the three people I'm on here with, and I can't wait to talk about these two movies with them. I am Sean.
I am John.
I'm Missy.
And I'm Ray.
And we are going to discuss Christopher Nolan's Inception and Tenet. And if you spell Tenet backwards, it spells Tenet.
Yeah.
So,
Not just a mistake.
guys, how the hell are you?
Exhausted.
John, it's been a while. All is good in your life?
All is absolutely wonderful in my life. Couldn't be more thrilled at each and every single day. But man, these first few months of fatherhood, they'll definitely take a lot out of you.
Well, congratulations. It's good to have you back on the show. I'm glad everything's going very good, obviously, and I'm glad to have you back. And also, we were talking before we rolled. So you have, and I think we might have mentioned this when we did the last episode, but so you have this movie Save My Life with Miles Fortune, and wish Miles our best. Love Miles. But you also now have Moving Histories, which is a podcast where you and it's two other, at least the episode I heard was two other professors, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Professor Robert Burgoyne and Robert Burgoyne was formerly of Wayne State University and St. Andrews, where I did my degree, and Kim Nelson, just right across the lake from Detroit in Windsor, Ontario. And we've been, friends and colleagues for the last couple of years. We've done a lot of work together, did conferences together. We published edited volumes together. And last fall, all three of us came up with a crazy idea that, it might be okay if the few of us got together once a month and recorded podcasts on what we specialize in, which is historical representation on film and in television.
And so far, I've listened. Your first episode was Napoleon by Ridley Scott, which I was telling you before we rolled. I listened to because I had no intention of seeing.
Smart.
But you've also done Killers of the Flower Moon, which I do, and Oppenheimer, which I do, and Zone of Interest, which I do, even though I'm afraid of it a little bit. But man, just congratulations on the podcast, and everybody should just follow that and this movie Save My Life right now. If you're listening to this, if you're within the sound of my voice, although maybe people were like, Christopher Nolan, fuck you guys, that's not horror. But again, kind of taking that out of your argument right by titling this.
Just a quick heads up for the listeners. Moving Histories, in a few weeks, we're doing the new FX series Shogun, which I love. And in a few weeks, Miles and I are doing our April episode for this movie Save My Life on 1970s exploitation cinema.
Ooh.
Cool.
And then shortly after that, for I think over the course of 3 months, we're going to be doing a 3 episodes on 1994, 30 years later. So like all the best films, in our opinion, of 1994 and what made 1994 an exceptional year that still resonates, all this time.
Oh, wow.
That sounds really cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, wow. That's like my, wheelhouse. That's my senior year of high school. And man, a lot of good movies that year.
I don't want to say what films we're going to be looking at, but I might just say one of them may or may not be about a certain man who's not even supposed to be here today.
Yeah, awesome.
Wow. Oh, such good things to come. So, where do we start, guys? Do we start with? So let me. I'm gonna say something right off the bat. I've watched Tenet yesterday and the day before. I watched it 2 nights in a row, and I saw it for the first time about a month ago on the IMAX screen because when it was out, COVID was happening. I couldn't see it on a screen, and I just was like, "I'll wait." And luckily, that paid off. I almost watched it on IMAX a couple times, didn't. But one of the things that watching this movie now, 2 nights in a row leading up to this, I'm just not smart enough. Like I'm just not. There's goddamn. So I just want to say up front, this is really going to be your guys' show. I'll add where I can, but it dawned on me watching Tenet in IMAX for the first time. Christopher Nolan is really smart because Christopher Nolan is an exceptional filmmaker as the craft, right? These movies are gorgeous. They're unbelievable. They're outrageous, the shit that he does. And he's smart because if you just make that movie, but it's just a surface level story, people watch it and they're like, that was fucking great. And maybe they see it again at some time, but there's no urgency. Christopher Nolan's like, I'm going to make you watch my movies over and over again because you're going to try to fucking understand them. And when I realized that, I was like, chef's fucking kiss. Holy cow. Holy cow. And I will just say, I feel like Inception it's way easier for me to grasp than Tenet. And I don't know. I mean, where do we start? Ray, this largely, like, this is your brainchild as far as these movies, right? So where do you want to start?
I get maybe because I still remember when I saw Inception. Like I saw it at the now sadly closed Cinerama Dome, which was a weird experience. It was a great showing, but it was a weird experience because that night I arrived with our friend Jesus, and the AC had broken, and they're like, it's gonna be warm in there. And I go, oh, really? And they're like, yeah, I'll check it out. And they're like, okay, but just so you know, it's gonna be warm. And so I get in, and at first it wasn't too bad, but then it started to crowd with people, and it definitely was warm in there. And then oddly, when the section with the hospital came up with the snow, it had this weird effect where I started to feel like the room got cooler, and I was like, oh, thank you, Nolan, because somehow psychologically you made the room cooler for me.
Wow.
But it was so strange. But the funny thing was, I left the theater for like a second to go get like a water because of how warm it was getting as people were crowding in. And I always thought, well, after I saw it that time, that I had missed it a lot because I came back as I heard like the trailers end, and I walk into the theater and I walked in that scene where he wakes up on the beach. DiCaprio's character Dom wakes up on that beach, and they're like looking at him and trying to figure out where he's come from. And I was like, I must have missed like 5 minutes or something. I don't think it was that long. And I asked Jesus, I was like, what did I miss? And he was like, you didn't miss anything. And I go, really? I think I had to miss something. And then when I went to go see it the second time in the theater, I realized, oh, it's the thing of the movie because it's so smart. It has all these like not only auditory cues but smart cues. Like he literally starts the movie about dreaming in the middle of a dream. Like you just are there, boom, you're there, and it's like Dom. You don't know what's going on, you don't know who he is, and you have to find out as the film progresses. And if you listen really close when the Warner Brothers logo starts, you can hear that it starts with the music that's played slow down. I forget the Edith Piaf song. I looked up the name the other day, but that trigger, the dun dun dun, it's there. It starts playing slowly at the start of the film. And for people who know, if you watch all the way through to the end of the film, it ends with the music slowing down again, telling you as an audience, you're going to wake up from this. It's about to be done. So it's smart because it keeps it inside of the concept that he constructs. Um, but yeah, I mean, I saw Tenet unfortunately on the small screen when it came out because again, it was during COVID. I think the one place that we could have seen it was when we went to go see Beyond Fest. I know it was playing at the drive-in right behind us.
Yeah, I
And I
wasn't
thought
going to
it
do
would have been a
that.
fun experience, but I don't think it would have been right for
Nope.
that movie.
Nope.
And thankfully, they decided to re-release it, so I got to see it on the big screen for the first time, like a month or so ago, at the Chinese. Excellent experience, and they gave us a little film strip, like a little
Yeah, same.
uh thing, and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool!" So yeah, I really dig both movies. I've been a fan of Inception for years. Tenant, the first time I saw it, I went, I don't get this at all. And then had to go and then I rewatched it like a couple days later and went, oh, now I get it. But he has that replayability. Like he smartly makes films that demand for you to go back, rewatch, and once you know everything about, like, once you've got the storyline down, you can go back and rewatch stuff and realize, oh, I didn't get that the first time, and I know why I didn't get it now.
Yeah.
But oh man, I mean, he just crafts these very strong stories. Visually, they're amazing. The he gets great cinematographers to work on his films. Like everything just looks very crisp, very nice. And it's not related to this film, but I don't know if you heard, but for Oppenheimer, like he didn't want to do a visual effect, like a fake of an explosion. He did a real
Yeah.
small explosion for for the atomic bomb test. It's like, damn, this guy is awesome. Like he's very invested in being a filmmaker. He's very invested in his stories, and like he knows what he's doing. I don't know. I guess we could start with Inception and go from there. I feel like I've been talking a lot already, so if anyone else wants to jump in, go for it, please. John, maybe.
Yeah, so I saw Inception in the theater. Tenet, I did not. I really wish I could say, that I was one of the people who was brave enough to see it when it came out in the theater, and that just wasn't the case. It just didn't.
Hmm.
It didn't pan out that way. Um, and I was thinking about both films, because I think the pairing of both of those films is appropriate. And it made me really realize that whenever I hear the phrase high concept film being thrown about, I immediately become skeptical because there's a lot of films that are high concept if they, one, engage in ideas that are slightly of higher intelligence level than that of your average Hollywood disposable entertainment film. And B, they insist on that the audience not be passive spectators. Like 2001 immediately comes to mind because it demands that you're an active spectator, and it's clearly of above average intelligence. But I don't think that's what people have in mind when they say high concept film. For those of you in the audience that studied film and media in college, know there's a theoretical side in film studies that use contemporary philosophy and cultural theory to explore the nature of film and how it shapes our understanding of reality and how our society is structured. And I think that when people say high concept film, they're talking about films that really started emerging during the late 90s and early 2000s that openly acknowledge film theory is an important component of film and media. Like The Matrix is really like the prime example. It draws on Jean Baudrillard's idea, and The Truman Show like is about apparatus theory, and Terrence Malick's films are practically a dissertation on Gilles Deleuze's ideas about the nature of time in film. And I think both Tenet and Inception, Christopher Nolan's doing this kind of high concept film. And this time around, I thought about it and I thought, it's really kind of the best thing and the worst thing about these two films. It's like I really love the way that Nolan echoes the Matrix in both films and directly quotes Satoshi Kon's films like Perfect Blue and Paprika. You get the rotating hallway scene in Inception that's just straight out of Kon's film Paprika. Yet sometimes, on the other hand, I feel like he gets kind of swept up in the intellectual ideas and loses sight of emotional truth. And sometimes I feel like I'm seeing more technique and form. And I'm not saying like there has to be like these emotional stakes or sentimentality, but emotional truth about the human condition, which is why Dunkirk, I've always kind of felt is his best film because it blends those two tendencies together perfectly. Um, and really coming out of this, I've found that I've appreciated Tenet a lot more than Inception. It's not that I didn't enjoy Inception, but I was kind of lukewarm on Tenet the first time I saw it. Now, having come back to it, there's a lot more than I appreciate that I was able to unpack. I think coming at it from this understanding of what Christopher Nolan is trying to do, and to Sean's point, just sort of how intelligent he really is, that I think really did it for me this time around, really elevated to a different level.
Missy?
That's pretty cool. Um, all right. I saw Inception in the theater when it came out. It's one of my favorite movies. I've seen it several several times, lots of times. Um, and it always kind of felt made for me. Tenet, I saw it right after Sean did. Um, I don't tend to like time travel as a story device, so I had kind of avoided it. Um, I mean, I knew it was a Nolan movie, and I could probably still enjoy it, but it just wasn't something that sounded super appealing. But after Sean saw it in the theater, he said that since I liked Inception so much, I'd probably like Tenet. So I gave it a try. I liked it a lot more than I thought I did. Or than I thought I would. Not as much as Inception. I think Inception's a great film. I think Tenet is really good. Um, but same thing as you guys were saying. I mean, I'm assuming that all of the physics and stuff he's talking about are correct, but I just kind of accept it as like Star Trek science and say, okay, that's fine, and just ride along with the movie anyways. That said, it's still an enjoyable film to watch. I mean, it's a different take on time travel that it doesn't do most of the things time travel movies do that irritate me. It has a really similar rhythm to Inception, even though they're really different topics. So, I mean, overall, I was glad that you guys saw Tenet and recommended seeing it. I enjoyed it. I have some issues with it, but I do really like how it's filmed, and a lot of the visual and audio cues that you get in it.
That's cool. Um, Going back to what you were saying, John, like with Tenet, do you feel like when you speak about the emotionality and the human condition, um, one of the things that struck me, I think, on my second viewing, because I guess the first viewing I just was so caught up in trying to understand how things were working and moving back and forth in time. The I think it was my second or third viewing that I caught how much the protagonist, like how much the story is driven by how the protagonist wants to protect. I'm totally blanking on her name, the wife.
Oh yeah.
Um, and how he's asked that line at the beginning of the film of like, would you kill someone to stop something from happening? And he's like, absolutely. Would you kill a child or a woman? And he's like, depends. And like you
No,
can
he
tell
says
right
he would
away.
not kill a child, but
Yeah,
But
he
with
would not kill a child.
would you kill or take a child hostage? No. What about a woman? It depends.
right,
Yes, that's right. That's right. I'm sorry. You got it exactly. But I wasn't, it struck me the second time I watched it, or second or third time I watched it, and realized, oh my God, that line is pretty crucial for who he is as a person, because the whole rest of the film is informed by how he doesn't just want to do this job, he wants to save her too. it's a big hang up for him. Like he's the protagonist, and like plus I don't know. That's one of the things I fucking love in that movie. The fact that he pulled off making a whole goddamn movie. He gave everyone else, every other character, a name. He got away with calling him the protagonist, and that is the name of the character. That's amazing. That's, I mean, I don't know. That just is so impressive to me. Like the only other thing I can think of is like Fight Club, where if you realize like that lead character, Edward Norton's character, is never given a name, so
No,
he's
it's a
just the
narrator.
protagonist. He actually
The
refers
narrator.
to him as the narrator, but he's just referred to. He actually just refers to himself too as the protagonist, and like I am the protagonist, and I'm like, oh my god, that's so. I love that. Um, but going back, I mean, do you feel like that's part of the emotionality for you? Because I don't know. Because the other thing for, I mean, for Dom, I mean, because if we're comparing, contrasting, like for Dom, it's the guilt. It's he's so guilt driven by what he did to his wife that, and we don't quite get that until the film gets to its third act. But he's so guilt driven that like it's a big portion of the film.
The weird thing is that it came out the same year. Inception came out the same year as Shutter Island, which
I
is
know.
a far superior,
Wow, you're right.
far superior film. And if you want to talk about somebody who has guilt over, like his wife, like yeah, I would go with Shutter Island any day of the week. There, to go to your point about Tenet, yeah, I mean, in some respects, when you're looking at the protagonist and the idea of emotionality or lack thereof, it's not really Inception that really is the pairing that you should do with Tenet in that regard. It's really The Dark Knight, because the Joker has been reincarnated as the protagonist and has become a lot wiser, and has become a much better projection space for the digital age. That's kind of really what the Joker is. He's a sort of blank slate, and what everyone fears, coming out of a society of surveillance, at the height of the Iraq War and the Bush era, like during the time when The Dark Knight came out. This is John David Washington as the protagonist, really embodies how, like, sort of the digital age and the age of social media has rendered us completely emotionless in a completely different kind of way. Just sort of like his affect and everything. He kind of, in some, there's some parts of the movie where he kind of reminds me of Ryan Gosling as the driver in Drive.
Oh, interesting. I could see
Okay.
I
that.
can see that.
I could see that too.
I will say with Inception, Ray, you referenced Dom's guilt. And here's the thing about Inception that cracked the movie open for me. I saw it in the theater, and then I saw it, whenever the first time I saw it on video. My read on Inception, which I now feel like has to be everybody's read, but I remember telling you this, Ray, and I remember you being like, really? My read, and it's I know, well, okay. I can't say I know I'm right, because it's constructed in a way, it is the spinning dreidel or whatever that thing is. There is no, it's perfectly balanced to be whatever you think it is. So I'm not right, but I'm also not wrong. But Marion Cotillard's character, she is actually the good guy in the fucking movie in a way, because he is not in reality. He is still lost, and she is coming in trying to wake her fucking husband up. And he thinks the exact opposite, but he's fucking wrong. And I rewatched it over the weekend, and there is a point where that interpretation cracks, and that's when they're in that limbo, right? But it's not the same. What is her name in the movie?
Mal.
Mal. It's not the same Mal. That's his interpretation, his phantom. But the one that keeps trying to get him to jump, when she jumped, she woke up. He's still there. That's my interpretation. And the reason why I think I'm right is because, and you reference this, there's a point there. Okay. There's a point where in a discussion with Ellen Page's, now Elliot Page's character, you always start a dream in the middle. That's where the movie starts, right? That's where his life, as we know it, starts. And then there's another thing where she says, is that what happened to you? Like, oh, because he says using places from memory is the best way to get lost. And she's like, yeah, is that what happened to you? So the whole thing is just what we're seeing is him wherever and her and Mao trying to wake him the fuck up. So I don't know. That really empowers the way, like, I love that movie because of that. I think both movies to me are just, I watch those movies, I'm like, this motherfucker, I mean, he's 6 years older than me, but I'm like, this shit's G.I. Joe. This is a dude playing with his action figures. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Tenet's, like, the way Tenet starts, I'm like, this is 100% a kid playing with his action figures, but he's getting paid to do it on the largest scale possible, right? With Inception just feels the same thing. It's mega comic book. It's just, oh man, they blow me away because of that. Anyway, sorry, had to point that out about Inception.
He's playing chess as well because he's such a Kubrick fanboy. You know,
Yes. Oh yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I don't want to. I don't. I guess for the sake of spoilers, unless we're doing it, I don't want to
No,
say.
No, we can't do this
Yeah.
without doing spoilers. So I'll put a
Yeah.
spoiler
Do
thing at the
spoilers.
beginning.
Yeah, okay, fine. For the temporal pincer movement alone from Tenet, yeah, that's and the layering of realities and dream states and so it mimics the way you use chess strategies for Kubrick used chess strategy for plotting. Not revealing your strategy in the first move, not getting excited when something presents itself as a good idea and creating misdirection and so on and so forth. And he's doing that in both movies. I want to throw this question out to all of you just because it's been on my mind lately. In some ways, I think the Tenet soundtrack is not as memorable as the Inception soundtrack, but it's still really good.
Mhm.
Do you think it would have been better or worse if instead of Ludwig Göransson, it had been Hans Zimmer? If Hans Zimmer had not been too busy with Dune, he would have gotten Hans Zimmer to do the score with him.
I love the Tenet soundtrack, so I wouldn't change a thing.
Fair enough.
Oh, that's hard to say. I can see. Oh, I think it's good, but I can understand exactly where you're coming from because I mean, isn't Dark Knight and most of his other films all Hans Zimmer as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing, I mean, Tenet. I know the soundtrack. It fits so perfectly,
Yeah.
and just based on his other films that I've seen, like I remember seeing Dark Knight in the theater and being so impressed by the score because there were these moments where one of my favorite ones is the cue where they're moving Harvey Dent in the SWAT car, in the SWAT truck, and it's an overhead shot of the city, and it's just after the Joker has shot that cop that's hiding inside the truck, and it's an overhead shot of the city, and it's the score is it's a, oh good lord, violin, I believe, and it's just this very high pitch, just amping up the tension, and then it just suddenly goes quiet. And I remember when it happened a couple different times in that movie where it would just go from like sound to suddenly just quiet. And I remember sitting in the theater and noticing it and then recognizing that it caused the whole audience to stop and pay attention. And it was so impressive the way that they used the score to make the audience pay more attention to the film that I was like, God damn, this guy knows what the fuck he's doing. Like, wow. The scores are so pivotal in his films. Like Dunkirk. I mean, it just, if you're paying attention, like the way that they just keep amping up the tension using the score. Just it'll start slow and then it'll start amping, it'll go faster and faster, and the tempo picks up, and it becomes like a menace to you as you're watching the film, and it mimics the tension on the screen, and like he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. And like I think you're right. I mean, it probably would have worked more with the Zimmer, but I do like the score that's on Tenet for sure. But I'm curious. It is curious to think what a Hans Zimmer score what might have been, you know.
Miss
And to
Missy,
go
what do you
back to
think?
what you were, oh, go, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Keep going, Ray. Keep going. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, going back to what John said about the chess, is that it's funny because I used to say to people years ago after seeing Inception, and people would say like, what's it about? And I go, you have to watch it. And I'd say, I'll tell you this though, as a hint. It's like watching someone solve a very hard puzzle, but in a very small, at a low level, like a small Rubik's cube in the first half of it, or the first third of it, and then and going like literally like watch, I'm gonna do this. Okay, see how I solved that. Okay, watch, I'm gonna do it again, but I'm gonna do it bigger, but it's still gonna be the same. Pay attention. And he does it, and like he explains even how he's gonna do it with Inception, and then when it's still over, people still go, oh, I don't know how you did that. Wow.
Yeah.
If you can compare it to chess, it's like watching somebody play against a child, and then and then do it again, but this time do it against like a grandmaster or like Big Blue, and being like, watch, I'm gonna do it in 15 moves. And you're like, how did you do that? Aren't you impressed? Like, shit, I guess.
I love that analogy. I remember you telling me that the first time. Missy, what do you think about the score?
I think I would have preferred the Zimmer.
Okay.
I love the music in Inception, and I don't really like the score of Tenet. I I like the idea of using some of the music in reverse, but there's parts where it gets extremely repetitive, and in a way that it makes me anxious. Like it feels like it's pounding against me, whereas the Inception music is very sweeping and sucks you into the story. I feel like the Tenet score with those repeated sounds pushes me out.
Okay.
So I think I probably would have greatly preferred the Zimmer. Not to say that, Tenet isn't a good movie, but I don't like the score.
I love that score. There's something about the repetitive nature that I don't know, man, this movie, Tenet, there's things about it that I can almost get. Like it's so funny because I described it to Kirsten last night, like it's like trying to remember a dream. I almost have it. And then I realize, oh, it almost sounds like I'm talking about the other movie, about Inception, right? Which I don't think that's a mistake. I definitely think his movies are stepstones, right? And there's definitely something of the DNA led to from Inception led to Tenet. The same way there's a point in Tenet where they're talking about Oppenheimer. I'm like, well, it's no fucking surprise what his next movie was. I mean, really. But man, it's I feel like it is not. I feel like Tenet is not a time travel movie because the only
No, not
element,
really.
the only element of time travel as we know it is the fact that Andre Sador's character has people in the future that are informing him or they're sending him stuff or whatever. But other than that, there's no other movie I know of where you're literally it's like more about I don't even know how to verbalize it. It is definitely an intellectual exercise. And also when I say I'm not smart enough, the thing is, the way that movie was written, it was talked. I mean, and it's funny because this is a movie Nolan has sole writing credit for, right? Because his brother is often a co-writer or whatever, but this is just credit to him. But I feel like you would have to get to where that movie goes by talking about it. because there's no way you can just write that. Ideas have to bounce and rebound and be caught and then thrown out again and it's slightly different. I mean, it is the scene that absolutely I just think is pivotal. Oh, and also let's just talk about the fucking this when John David Washington is like, I'm going out there, and then they have to Fuller has to brief him, and you see this actor entering a world that's running in reverse. I'm just like, fuck you, holy shit! Talk about a set piece. But I mean, among all these other set pieces, the scene that I hang up on is the car chase, where it's not the first time, but well, it's both times, but when John David Washington throws the Pelican case that supposedly has the algorithm in it, and it bounces off the car that John David Washington is also driving, right? The inverted, and goes into Andre Sador's hand, who's also inverted. Sador is actually throwing it because of the movement. And I know there's something pivotal, and it's going to take me talking about it, like I was saying, the way it must have been written. I'm going to have to watch it over and over and really just like chew on it. But I love that. Like, I mean, fuck, it's amazing. What other, there's other movies don't do that anymore. I mean, people could say like, oh, the Marvel movies have like conundrums. Fuck that. I mean, I love comic books, but not even fucking close. Not even fucking close, right? I mean, yeah, I don't know.
I think my favorite part of Tenet is the way it's lit. Where I was watching it and picked up on the warm lighting and lots of use of red moves you forward in time and through the story, but blue and the really cool scenes, and they get bluer as you go deeper, is time moving, or is when you're moving in reverse. So you've also got visual cues and color cues to help you keep track of what's going on, and when we're moving forward in the story or when we're moving in reverse. And I think that's both brilliant and beautiful, and probably my favorite thing about that.
It's hard for me to decide whether it's Tenet or Inception that has the better set pieces. And I would really kind of have to go with Tenet on that one. And which ones where I think like the action is, and it probably is because he's really kind of found himself doing 70 millimeter with almost like everything he's done recently, and it just sort of comes through strongly with Oppenheimer. And so I think maybe that's where Tenet gets the edge for me.
I really like them both visually. Like, I just rewatched Inception last night, and one of the things that I always found impressive was the way that he captures the way that dreams don't make sense, and the crazy shit that happens in dreams that we just go, oh, that makes sense, and then like when you wake up, you're like, what in the hell was that? Like, I love that. I love the train that just comes up out of this on the street. So that is nuts. Like, I remember seeing that in the trailer and thinking like, wait, is it just a train that's off tracks just rolling down that street? And then I saw the movie and I was like, yeah, it's a fucking train just rolling down tracks without any kind of tracks. Like, it's nuts.
Well, I love that Ellen Page's character is like, yeah, the others need to know that at any minute a train could just come out of nowhere.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I mean, and then he's got like those buildings that are just literally right on a beachhead, like, and like the whole thing with their house inside of the bottom level, where, oh, we always like this kind of building, but we wanted to live in a house. And the real world, you have to pick one, but here you can live in both. And the way the house is, like her house that she grew up on is in the middle of this city, but it's in the middle of this like lake that's accessed by this small little walkway. Like, and if you're in reality, you're like, who'd build something like that? But in a dream, you're like, yeah, that totally makes sense. It
Mhm.
honestly reminded me of this crazy dream I had like 6 months ago or something. And it stuck with me where I had to tell people about it, and everyone was looking at me like, "That's weird. Are you serious?" And I go, "Yeah." I was in this like big mall complex that was a town and city all into itself, and the bottom level was like dirt floors, like honestly, like the streets of Mombasa in the movie, or and it had like a bazaar, like a market bazaar, and people just trading like chickens and carrots and things like that, like an open air market. And then and then I got to the next level, and it was just like a mall, but people were like living there too. And then the top floor was like really posh and nice, like the Beverly Center level, and like super nice homes, and like, and I thought, wait, this is all multi-level, the same structure? And the answer was apparently a dream. It was yes. And I didn't even think two things about it. And then when I woke up, I was like, what in the world was that? But it's the kind of thing that like you see in that film, and I'm like, and I think to myself, wow, he really knew how to play with the concepts that these were dreams and like just visually created. Um, but the one of the other things that I always I'm always impressed by him is his use of literary devices in the film medium. Like I remember seeing Inception, and the repetition of lines, like I actually counted it this last time because I was like, I always have been telling people about it. There's certain lines that get repeated
You're
in the movie
waiting for a
Inception.
train.
There's the waiting for a train, take a leap of faith, that's done 3 times.
Mhm.
An old man filled with regret waiting to die, that's 3 times. Something you once knew from a half forgotten dream, that's done like 4 times. Like, and the thing was is that I remember seeing the movie, and it hit me the first time I saw it in the theater. Like I was like, wow, this is so cool the way he's using repetition. And I'm like, and he just changes it just a little bit, but he's getting away with it, and it's really impressive. And then after I saw it, I talked to people who had seen the movie, and I went, I love the way he just kept repeating those lines. And they went, uh, there was lines that were repeated? I go, oh yeah, go back and watch the film again. He repeats certain lines, and he just changes them just a little bit, and he's stressing those moments in the film. And he did it in such a way that it got past people, most people that I knew. And then when they went back and watched it, they're like, he does repeat the lines. I go, I
Mhm.
know, it's amazing. He's using a literary device of repetition in a film, and he's getting away with it because he just changes it just a little bit. And it doesn't sound hokey or I forget the word I'm looking for, but like he's run out of things to say. He's doing it on
Mhm.
purpose, and most people just kind of sink into it and go, "Oh, okay." And then once you hear it and you realize it, you're like, "Wow, that's impressive!" Like it's not easy to, and especially in a film, to repeat a line and have it not come off as cheesy or um, lazy in your writing the second time around. And he gets away with it. He does it. He does it well. I can't think of repetition in Tenet, but I'm sure it's there. And like, there's other like things. Well, I mean, the fact that the character is called the protagonist. It is a straight a literary device. It is a literary
Well,
term, and he steals it and
ignorance
puts
is
it in
our
the film
ammunition.
medium.
That's repeated multiple times. But it's
Yes,
one of the
yes.
basic tenets, right, of the
Oh,
Mhm.
movement. So I mean, in that way, it's absolutely brilliant.
And if you're if Ray, and if you're a fan of Red Letter Media, he's the protagonist.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness! Wait,
I like it.
is that a joke somebody made, or is
It's
that
a
like
it's the Mr. Plinkett reviews of Star Wars. He's like, there's something in literature, kids. It's called a character. It's called a protagonist.
oh my God, that's amazing.
Okay.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
That's good. I like it.
What else?
Something I've always thought about with Inception, and I wonder how you guys feel about it too. Everybody has their little totems. They made them, but Cobb's isn't his.
No.
No, it's
I mean, that's
not.
why I've
It's his
always thought that,
wife's.
right, that he was, that like the whole movie was a dream that we're lost in his head, because he's not using his own. And even at the end, when it's up to you whether you think it keeps spinning or it stops, for her, it would spin forever if it was a dream. But we don't even know if, like, can he really trust it because it's not his?
That's a good point.
They don't let anybody else touch those totems. The loaded die, Arthur won't let her see touch his loaded die. She won't let Dom touch the chess piece. But he's using somebody else's that was made by her, and he betrayed her. And now he's using her totem. I think the whole movie's a dream. And that he can't trust this totem because it's not his, is how I always took it.
That fits with my interpretation as far as he's using her totem because he's lost and she's probably drawn to the totem. It's how she can find him. But I just get that sense that, you see it, I think, twice where she's on the ledge and he's like, she jumps and he can't do it because he doesn't want to leave it behind. But she's like, you got to wake up.
Well, because he thinks he's in the real world and that she's the one who's lost.
And and I don't think he is. There's a thing with Inception, I feel like, and I think it's there in Tenet too. It's just he got better at disguising it. There's stuff about Inception I don't think works, but it doesn't matter. It's totally the guy in the poker game with a shit hand who gets everybody else to fold because he just is so fucking convincing, right? And so there's stuff about it where I think if you look at it too closely, it starts to break down a little bit.
I agree.
And I think there's stuff about Tenet that is probably like that, but I haven't found it yet because I think it's just better at playing that hand.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've always kind of felt, well, not always. I mean, not until I saw Tenet, that it seemed like Inception was kind of a dress rehearsal for Tenet, in some ways, and I didn't really think that until very recently because maybe Tenet didn't resonate with me when I saw it right away. Maybe I didn't see it in the right way, but because for me it seems like both, like he's arguing in both films that really like a mechanized age, is really just a descent from civilization into barbarism that's masquerading as progress. And both films just kind of really show like the dark side of that. Then I think both films, they also show that reveal, I mean, Tenet way more so than Inception, that modern warfare is based on perception and modes of looking, and we just kind of don't really realize it. It's just because it's like so just embedded into our culture. I think, to your point, I think Inception, it's not like he's spelling everything out because I think Christopher Nolan is much better than that. But he's a lot better at concealing his hand and in Tenet, and where you kind of don't really know that how that you're being played with Tenet very much as you were in Inception, but I still haven't really quite figured out how. Whereas Inception, I was able to understand it pretty quickly. People say, oh, Inception's like, this impenetrable, tough movie that's like impossible to understand. I'm just like, no, it's not. It's not that hard.
Well, I think because it's ambiguous is what a lot of people have trouble with, and that's why they think it's impenetrable. I think that's one of its greatest strengths is that it is the top. we're never gonna, there is no way to say you're right, because you're not. There's multiple, like, but there's like a plethora of interpretations, and they all work because it's so intelligently crafted. However, there's points where it breaks down. But Tenet, it's like what Missy, when you said like you just accepted this kind of Star Trek science, like I don't even know how to understand some of the stuff that I'm seeing. Like I understand it on one level conceptually or like theoretically, but I don't know that it works. I don't know that it doesn't work. There's stuff about Inception though where I'm like, I feel like he's breaking what he's building in order to go further with it.
To add to that, I understand what you're saying because famously, the film of Nolan's that I didn't like all that much when I saw it, and I feel like I need to give it a rewatch. I've only ever watched it completely one time, was Interstellar. And I didn't like the ending, and it hit, and I just thought to myself, oh God, he's just trying to do like his version of like a M. Night Shyamalan like ending, and it just bothered me. And then afterward, it's been years since I've seen it, and then I saw something recently where there was this interview with an astrophysicist where they asked him, what are films that you think are really terrible? Like, what films do you think are really inaccurate? What films do you think are really accurate as far as like what your science is? And he just started naming stuff off, like, oh, this is terrible. This is exaggeration. He said, Interstellar gets so much of the science that we're working on right now, right? Because he
Wow.
talked to astrophysicists, he talked to people who knew this, and he embedded it in the film. So he's not just making his own shit up. He based this on real scientific theory that's out there. He based it on real thought processes. And knowing that, I went, wow, maybe I need to go back and think about that film again, and also like look at some other film, maybe like look at some of the concepts in Tenet, because he apparently is not one of these guys that just runs off half cocked and is just like, oh, this is an idea. What could be possible? He looks at real scientific theory and goes, how is this going to be possible? How does this work? And how can I make this into something that is plausible? And apparently it's what he does. So like I get what you're saying. But so maybe it's that like there's things where you're just like, I don't quite get this. And like it's because maybe it's a really abstract, difficult concept to approach.
Well,
And it
yeah,
takes a lot
Tommy
of like
Tennant.
thought process
Yeah.
and learning to get to, and you're like, wow, I really need to think this through.
Well, and I feel like Tenet is a good example of, so I think it's graspable and I think it's based on I know it's based on actual science, but
Yeah.
we see more passive movies than we see active, to use
Yeah.
John's, vernacular from earlier, right? His terminology. And so there is an element of like I love being an active viewer,
Yeah.
but I'm not called to do so that often. And normally I can rise to the occasion. But when you're putting this shit out there, and that's why I like this so much, where I'm like, I'm just hyper focused on certain things because I'm like, I know it's there and I know I can understand it. I just have to engage with it more. And, it's refreshing. And not to take anything away from any of his other movies, but I just feel like, and I have not seen Interstellar. And
Me
in
neither.
fact, while you were speaking, so they're releasing, so IMAX is releasing all of his shit again, this like in the
Ooh.
coming months, right? But it's really like, at least by me, it's very limited. And Interstellar, so is playing by me, but I have to drive to Nashville on a Thursday at 11:30 a.m. coming up in like 2 weeks, right? And that's the only, but dude,
What a
they're
weird
doing
time of day.
Yeah.
it's the same thing with all of his movies. They're doing all the Batman movies, Dunkirk, everything is doing that. It's like that time. So I think it must be one Thursday a month at 11:30 a.m. or something. It's
Oh,
fucking nuts. but I actually might take the day off work to go see that because it's another one I never saw, and I just feel like I'd rather see it on the big screen the first time because he does himself a little bit of a disservice. And I remember hearing him talk about Tenet and like what John said, where like you didn't the risk was not worth the reward when that came out. I felt the same way. I remember Christopher Nolan basically being like, "You have to go see this in the theater. I shot this to see it in the theater." I'm like, "Bro, there's a fucking pandemic. Okay, I love
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
I'm sure the movie's amazing. I'm not risking my fucking life." And because at that point in time, that was early. I had no
Mhm.
idea. I mean, I know there are people out there walking around like, "Hey, you fucking pussy. I knew all along." I didn't, right? I was like, I'm going to mind my P's and Q's. I'm not going to go to a movie theater right now. It's very
Yeah.
early in this. I don't know what, I don't know. I don't know how to gauge this experience. This is new to my life. And, I'm going to err on the side of caution. So I didn't go see it. But I remember Christopher Nolan like was kind of losing his mind because also you got to figure the money he spent on it and that happened. He's like, this is not fucking happening. You need to go see this movie in the theater. I'm like, no, no, I
Yeah.
waited 4 years. Luckily, it came back around. But you know,
And I mean, see Interstellar. I mean, to Ray's point, when I saw Interstellar, it made me think, "God, I wonder if Christopher Nolan thinks he's an alien." Some of the ideas were really interesting, but I was just like, God, it's almost as like Christopher Nolan thinks he's an alien.
I like that. That's an interesting thought.
which of these two movies, starting with Missy, which of these two movies do you feel like? Now, I'm not saying it's your favorite movie, but like out of the two, but which of these two movies do you think is the better movie? There is no wrong answer.
I still think it's Inception. I mean, I
Okay.
think they're both very good. Um, Inception, I love this. I think the set pieces are amazing. Um, and I think Inception just the visuals and the story, I just feel like it flows better. It sucks you in, and I can ride that story and not really be aware I'm watching a movie. Whereas Tenant doesn't. And then um, the way certain things are filmed with Tenant, I feel like I'm always aware I'm watching a movie because I keep pausing it to rewind to go back to look at something again. Whereas Inception, I can just get lost in it. And I agree with Ray and what you were saying about he knows how to make it feel like a dream. The visuals support the story he's telling, and for 2 hours I forget the rest of the world exists, and that doesn't happen with Tenet for me. Even though I think the visuals are incredible, and it's still a cool.
I would say on that level, I think you're right in that 100% with Tenet, it's a puzzle I'm trying to solve. Inception, I can just slip into it and like it is the
Right.
way that he presents dreams, right?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the movies I love the most are the ones that I can watch and forget I'm watching a movie. Whereas Tenet, it's a puzzle. It's not a story. It's a puzzle, and I want to get lost in the story. So for me, it's Inception.
John,
You know, I think I'm gonna wait another month and see if I can climb back into Tenet again and see if this grows. Because one thing I noticed as well is like for there was a class back in Seattle that I would teach repeatedly. It's like at least twice a year. It was just your intro to film, art of film, film aesthetics, and there's presentation assignments throughout where students present on certain films, ones that are not covered in class. And the last 3 times I taught the class, Tenet kept coming up, and I thought like, what is it that these students see in Tenet that I don't? And the more and more it happens, the more and more I see it. And I was like, I should have known. I really, really should have known, because, this happens routinely. And, I think I'm teetering on the edge of it being Tenet for me, but then, but I want to see if it opens up in the next viewing. My main, I think my number one favorite Christopher Nolan film, probably a tie between Dunkirk and The Prestige.
Oh God,
Oh, I love the
Prestige.
Prestige.
Prestige is
great,
amazing.
too.
All you got to do is say David Bowie is Nicholas
Yep.
Tesla, and then
Dude.
that's it. I'm
Oh
in.
my God,
Good call.
that mo-
Good call.
that movie. I mean, God damn that. Yeah, and the funny thing is though, it's like he has moved he's scaled up to such a level that Prestige is almost simple, right? Comparatively, but there's an element of that makes it better. That movie is so, I think it is his best movie in my opinion, just partially because of the simplicity versus the complexity doesn't interfere. And there is, John, you're 100% correct. Like his Nolan's craft gets in the way sometimes, right? I don't think it's a bad thing. We've come to love it about him, but I don't think that's the case under Prestige at all. I think that everything fires on all cylinders, and it's just the most elegant.
Yeah, Prestige is simple and elegant, and Dunkirk, you get complex, and it doesn't get in the way. It doesn't. It doesn't trip itself up and get tangled up in that complexity. Tenet and Inception, I think, do, but I wouldn't, if we were to rank them, from like, I think favorite to least favorite, I would not throw Tenet and Inception like, super far down the list. They'd be like, they'd both be hovering around mid-level.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Ray?
Maybe give it to Inception just because I've had more viewings. Plus, I'm a sucker for crimes. I'm a sucker for the heist film genre, and essentially that's what Inception is.
Yeah.
It's a heist film. So I've always loved that about it. But I'll tell you what, every viewing of Tenet since the first time I saw it, including this last time when I saw it at the Chinese, I don't feel the length. Like it just like the first time I watched it, I felt the length. I felt like the 2.5 hours. And then this last time I saw it, it zipped by. Like the next thing I knew, the movie was over, and I was like, damn, I can't believe that's done. And then I realized like it just for some reason it just goes. The next time after your first viewing, it just starts going. Because once you've kind of got an idea of what he's doing as far as the time travel stuff or the not time travel stuff. I forget what the exact terminology is. Um
Well, it's like the flow of time. That's what it
the
does.
flow
It like
of time,
reverses and yeah.
yeah. For once you got that, the movie moves, and like you just are taken for the ride. God, I think that's probably how I'd go. I'd probably say Inception, but only a little bit ahead of Tenet. It's a very small margin. I really like the leads in both. Inception has more of a team feel, whereas Tenet is just him and Neil for a good majority of the film. And then you've had Eames coming in at the end.
Yeah. Who totally would have been
Um,
Tom Hardy if Tom Hardy hadn't gotten to the level that he got to, right? Like
no
nothing
shit,
against
huh?
nothing against that actor, but I mean it's just one of those things. It's like that's like
It totally is,
it's the
yeah.
role Tom Hardy would previously have done, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, he loves to, and he's one of those people that loves to reuse his actors too.
Oh,
I
wait, I'm
mean,
sorry. Eames is Tom Hardy in Inception, right?
yes.
Who am I thinking of? The guy with the beard in Tenet.
Oh, it's the same
Kenneth
kid.
Branagh?
It's the kid who played from Kick Ass.
It is?
It's the same kid, yeah. That guy just got
No.
Yeah, that
No
same
fucking
actor.
way.
Yeah, he just got older and he got jacked. Like he started working out like crazy and shit. He was in Craven this past summer, which I didn't see,
Dude, wait
but
a minute. That movie never came out.
that
Did that
movie
movie
did
ever
come
come out?
out.
Oh, no, it didn't. I
It
thought I
did
dreamed
too.
that. I dreamed that, and then my ex-wife showed up and tried to get me to wake up before I went in to see it because she knew that
Just
it would
like,
destroy
oh,
my
okay.
brain cells.
It was in this. It's playing at the same Dream Cinema as Mobius and Madam Web. So Sony's failed Spider-Man a joke. So that's what they. That's the name of that cinema. But no, yeah, it's the same guy. It's the same actor. It's the same actor. I remember seeing
Oh
Tenet for
my
the first time. I was like,
fucking
who
God.
is that dude? And then I was like, that's that guy? Damn, he got jacked.
Aaron
Like he's
Taylor Johnson.
yes, he's
Holy
tall. He's
shit.
worked out. He's fucking ripped, man. That guy's a monster.
So what are we
He doesn't look anything like him.
is this the commander of the military mission in
Yeah.
Tenet?
Yes,
Holy shit. Well, I'll tell you another
that's the
thing.
same
I
kid from
didn't,
Kick-Ass.
dude, I didn't realize till last night that fucking
Damn.
Satyr is Kenneth Branagh. I was like, wait,
Yeah,
what?
That I
was
knew.
like,
he's so
what?
fantastic. I love Brana. I
Oh, he's
swear to God, I
dude,
love
he's
Brana.
so good in this fucking movie. I mean, there's just stuff in Tenet. And so I'd have to go with Tenet. And just because of the fucking audacity that, like, I mean, there's so many moments in that movie where I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, like, I don't know. I mean, set piece doesn't even be that. I feel like it doesn't even begin to acknowledge what some of the things that he does. But that definitely that moment when he walks out there with that mask on and everything is backwards. I mean, and
Yeah,
I was
that's
telling
cool.
I was saying to Kirsten, I'm like, I feel like there's no doubt in my mind, and maybe this is just because I'm like the ultimate David Lynch Twin Peaks fanboy. Like, to some degree, that led to this because I was watching the extras and they're talking about having to train the actors to move backwards or to talk backwards. And like, that's what David Lynch did with Twin Peaks. He had Michael Anderson, the man from Little Man from Another Place, who can fluently speak backward. I've met him, he can. Train everybody else how to deliver their lines backward, and then they would play it forward. And so that's a large part of how they achieve some of the effect in Tenet. And it's so the one thing I was like, I got to see the extra on the fight scene. You know, when they break into the art vault, right? I forget what
Oh yeah, yeah.
and he fights himself, and I'm like, I'm watching this, I'm like, how the fuck is this choreographed? Like, I don't understand what I'm looking at. Is one of them acting backwards, or is one of like, and when they explain it, it's absolutely insane. It's insane. And
Well,
even
yeah.
like,
If you watch, plus if you watch that fight scene, there's scenes where when it's when we're following it the first time, and you watch the protagonist, there's moments where he moves and he can't. If you watch his face, like he doesn't even understand why he's moving in the way he's moving. Like
yeah,
where he's like, "What the fuck is happening right now?" And like he doesn't get it, and then he realizes as the fight's happening, "Oh, this person's moving in reverse. I'm moving forwards, but because of the way that everything works with this concept." I'm reacting to what they're doing and not the other way around. And so when he does some weird move and he's like, why am I moving like this? It's the confusion is because he doesn't understand what's happening because time isn't working in the way it's supposed to be,
right,
in the way that he understands it. He's responding to the reverse way of time.
right.
But yeah, there's stuff in there that like is really smart and impressive, and like I think that's one of the things that I kind of love about both films, which I haven't addressed, but that he gets away with making these movies that if you pay attention, the amount of time that is used as far as telling the story is so small. It's only like a week in Inception, and it just feels so much longer. It feels like we are watching this team get together and plan everything out, but again, it's in dream time. So
Mhm.
what might be months for them or weeks isn't actually happening in real time
Mhm.
in that amount of time. It's happening in a few days. This is a fucking week. And in Inception, he literally tells the story forwards and then starts turning it in reverse when they have to start moving back in time to get to the point where he's back on the yacht with her.
Oh no,
And
no,
that actually
in
You mean
happens
Tenet,
before
in
Tenet.
the
Tenet.
film. Tenet, yes, in Tenet. I'm sorry, but yeah, he does this thing where he moves everything back in time, forward in time, and he starts moving it backwards in time. So the movie actually ends before it even began. That's amazing. Like I'm so impressed by that as far as storytelling goes, because he gets away with showing you the same thing like 2 or 3 times in that film and doing it in such a way that it's fresh and you're like, you realize later, like he did the same thing again, but it just isn't in such a different way that I didn't realize it the first time.
Well, it's slightly different, but so first of all,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Like, I don't know about I think even though I just watched this movie for the first time in 20 years, 12 Monkeys, I feel like I would have thought this anyway. In fact, I know because actually the first time I saw Tenet, I thought this, and it actually is now I'm thinking about it, probably the impetus for me watching 12 Monkeys. The thing with her talking about watching the woman dive off the boat and it's herself
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
so fucking the end of 12 Monkeys to me. Like
Yes.
100% the airport sequence.
Good
Mhm.
pull.
There is something about that whole sequence on the yacht at the end where I'm not even sure we know what we're seeing because I don't think
Yeah.
that's Sator because they say Sator wasn't on the boat, he was in the Ukraine. So even though he's not wearing the mask, I have to call into question like this is the thing. There's like these like intellectual calisthenics, and I think I suspect there's moments where what he's laid out breaks down, but I'm not positive because he's done it so well.
Well,
So he's hit
or
his hand.
it's the satyr from the original timeline who's traveled just like them back farther to re-experience that moment before he dies, where everything's good with Anna again,
But
and
he'd
then
have
that's
to
when
be
he's going to perish.
but he'd have to be wearing the mask, right?
No, what I mean is that he moved himself back far enough in time so that he could then reverse the flow of
Oh,
his.
Jesus Christ.
Do you know what? Okay, because remember, here's the thing: you have to realize Neil is from the future. He's not from
Right.
now. So Neil, at some point, because you have to travel back the same amount of time that you want to go forward, Neil travels back with them a week or 2 weeks after she's shot. I believe it's 2 weeks to go back to the point where they're on the boat. So what I'm saying is maybe Sator, because they were also chasing him after that scene. Sator started going back. He maybe went back 2 weeks and an extra day to get to that point where he's on the boat again with her. Does that make sense?
Dude,
Yeah.
that's
This is why I said it's Star
crazy.
Trek science. You just gotta ride it. If I overthink
And it's
it,
how he's able to argue with the protagonist, even though you're sitting there thinking, wait, he hasn't met the protagonist. How is he arguing with him on this walkie-talkie? He has, because it's the satyr from that time from the original timeline, not the satyr from the past.
Oh my God, that's so fucking crazy. Oh my
And the
God.
answer of like, wait, how is that possible? How does time flow? How can he get killed in the past but then be alive in the future? That can also be kind of answered by the thing that Neil says, which is like whatever has happened is going to
Yeah.
happen, and
Yeah.
like
right, what happened
we
happened.
can't
Another
change
repeated
that.
line.
Yeah.
Oh, Ray, I could kiss you on the mouth. Holy shit. I didn't see that. I just didn't see that, but that makes so much fucking sense. But also,
Well,
oh
I'll
my
rain
God.
check that for the next time you're in Los Angeles. Um, I'll wait until John's there.
I mean, this to me, this is everything. This goes to what John, what you were saying about like the way that film influences the way that we see the world around us. You know, art reflecting life, reflecting art, reflecting life.
Yeah, it's because both of these ideas both these ideas and film all came about with like the rise of modernity, and and the reason why we're seeing them kind of this crest again at the end of the century with films like The Matrix, and then kind of going again with films like Tenet, is because we're having those kind of crisis of modernity moments. Just like because a lot of the ideas like that were kind of being bandied about during the 1920s, in relation like how film explains how our lives are structured. They predicted the rise of the Nazis in the wake of the mechanical age as being like a failure, of all of this. And in many ways, the by this similar token, we get a prediction of the rise of Trump and the MAGAization of the Republican Party in the wake of the digital age, and just sort of the painful truth of false promises in the digital age. And I think Tenet takes that and really tries to riff on that and take the idea to the next level. In some ways successfully, in some ways not. But I think that's like I think that's why we're here. And I think if it did it, absolutely 100% perfectly, then, this would be a very short and boring episode.
Well said.
Very well said. I like that.
Me too.
What else? Are we ready for final thoughts? Like, I don't even know where this is a free fall. I don't know where we are with this.
I think Ray just made a Widowmaker, so
Yeah, maybe.
I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
I think Nolan is only getting better in his proficiency as a filmmaker. I mean, I don't think it's a mistake that like he's finally been recognized and got an Academy Award for his filmmaking. Oppenheimer's a fantastic film. If you're out there and you're listening and you still haven't seen it and you've seen these, go watch it. Oh man, it's so impressive. And like the acting's amazing. And like, I don't know, there's just stuff in there that like um so you still haven't seen Oppenheimer, Sean?
No, I haven't, because
Oh man.
so when it came back right before the Oscars, it did
Yeah.
not play IMAX. And I'm going to do the same thing I
Oh.
did for Tenet. If I got to wait 4 years, I'm going to wait 4 years, because
I say you got to see it on the big screen because
it's almost a
it's
fault with
not a
him.
bad decision, Sean. I think take your time with it, and
yeah.
your patience will pay off for sure.
I think it's better to see his films on the big screen, especially because there's scenes at the first third of Oppenheimer when he's a young man and he's studying, and the conundrum that is particle physics and wave motion theory, and how it's haunting him is, I guess, the best way to put it. That, and the way he filmed it really causes anxiety for you as a viewer. And I remember sitting there in the theater just being like, fuck, this is anxiety inducing, but it so gets across what the character of, and I guess it was truthful about what was going on with John Oppenheimer, that like this anxiety about what about about the science that he is studying and how it was causing him this stress, and like you can see it in the character, but you get it from what he does on screen.
Right.
That like when I saw it on the big screen, it paid off. Like it was a good experience seeing it at home, but man, that experience in the theater with not being able to control how loud the film was, because there's moments in that film that are just fucking loud. But if you're at home, you can just go. I remember seeing it with my parents, and it was like there's a scene towards the end where that takes place in a school auditorium where he's talking to a crowd, and you can just turn it down at home. Like I think I remember like we were watching it, and then it got really loud, and my parents went, "Oh, can you turn it down?" I went, "Yeah, turn it down." When you're in the theater, you can't. So you just have to endure it. And I think
Yep.
it's what he intends, and it's done on purpose. So I think he's only getting better as a filmmaker, and he's not sacrificing it by not being any less challenging or any less smart in his filmmaking or in his subject matter. Um, I appreciate that about him. So yeah.
Amen. John, final thoughts?
Yeah, I really hope that Christopher Nolan's Oscar win does not send him to the elephant boneyard in the way that it does with other um,
Oh, good call.
best picture and best director nominees. You use that clout in ways that are wise. Continue to make thought-provoking films, and hey, while you're at it, use that clout to bring the Cinerama Dome in Los Angeles back,
Yes.
please. I
Yes,
mean,
please.
if like if SIF was able to do that with the Cinerama in Seattle, which thank goodness they did, in bringing back the 70 millimeter film festival. Yeah, you can do the same thing with Cinerama, and LA, nay, the world will be a better place for it.
Amen.
Oh, amen to that. I've seen so many things at the Cinerama Dome, and yeah, I miss that place so much.
It'll
God,
be,
I
I mean, the
do
fact,
enjoy the Chinese, but man, someone needs to bring that shit back so
yeah,
much.
it will be back. I mean, it's still standing, and there's been,
Yeah,
what I mean, I feel like when I was there a year ago, people were like, "Oh, ArcLight's coming back," and then that
yeah,
unfortunately didn't happen. And like, I just think it's going to be a matter of time. But we are definitely. I feel like theaters. I mean, I don't know. There's always in 2024, you hear the. I mean, we've been hearing for over a decade, theaters are dead, this and that, and then you hear, oh no, it's thriving. So it's like anything else. We're just at a point where there is no empirical data is unfortunately the outlaw, right? And also you could just take any number you want and use it to, it's like the Bible. It can mean this or that, and and that's unfortunate. But I do feel like, I mean, just being out here in Clarksville, Tennessee, and the movies that I get and have access to leads me to believe all hope is not lost in it. I think we're probably actually doing pretty good, with theaters. And I think, I mean, look, the New Beverly was threatened. Tarantino bought it. It's never going to go
yeah.
away. I don't know. Christopher Nolan, buy the fucking Cinerama Dome. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's next.
Someone
But
buy it.
John, I don't think he'll boneyard, because I feel like I just feel like he's, if anything, maybe he'll get wackadoo, and we'll get a movie that's like, okay, I don't know
Pull
that
it
this
back,
makes
man.
sense at
Pull it
all,
back.
right?
Yeah, I know
But
what you
I'd
mean.
rather have that than the boneyard.
I was actually thinking about this the other day. I'm curious about all of your thoughts on this. Yeah, this segment of the Horror Vision might be called "That's Not Fucking Horror," but what if someday it is? What if what if he does? What if he does a horror film?
Oh God.
His idol Kubrick did it, so
Yeah.
why not him?
Yeah, that'd be
That would
dope.
be
I'd be
amazing.
fully behind that. Are you kidding?
Yep, just saying.
Well, and because I think it would be the kind of horror movie that, like The Witch or something, where it's like people are either going to be like, "Holy fuck, I'm on board," or "Fuck you, that's not horror." But I mean, horror. There's, yeah. Man, I would be all about that. I'm all. Oh man,
That would be
I would.
amazing.
Yeah, I'd be really on board with that concept so hard.
I'll just give my final thought is Nolan good, fire bad, because I feel like you guys summed it up in, anything else would be uncivilized, to quote commercials for men's deodorant from my youth. Um, you like that?
I,
I don't even know where that came from. But yeah, so I think we're gonna the Horror Vision Presents That's Not Fucking Horror is not going to be a regular thing, but we do have other ideas brewing, and they will probably, I think, Ray, you were the one that suggested they always be kind of like a double, like this
Feature,
Like a
versus,
double feature.
yeah, like a double feature.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to do that. So we will do this again.
I was very behind that, and like there's other films that we are banning about as far as concepts go, and like neo noir is a really strong subject matter that I think we could delve into,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
like constantly have like double features, because there's
And film noir was always a close cousin of horror to begin with. They're both rooted in German expressionism, and they're both concerned with, mapping the human psyche. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you could totally do double features of I mean, giallo horrors, like true giallo is essentially just really, really gory neo-noir.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's very well said. Yeah, I'd never thought of it in those terms, but you're 100% correct. But okay, so we will be back with a regular Horror Vision and probably an elements of horror before we do That's Not Fucking Horror again, but we will do it again. So until then, I'm Sean.
I'm John.
I'm Missy.
And I'm Ray.
A pandemic of violence floods the streets of major cities as cases of the media-dubbed murder virus, MV20, soar, causing those infected to go on killing sprees. Caught in the middle, police detective Angela Miller finds her only trustworthy ally in the self-proclaimed psychic PI, Gerald Henry. As the two try to navigate the violence, they are drawn into New Age guru Abramelin Harvest's plot to heal the planet. Harvest's missive?
The world is sick, and humanity is the infection.
The cure? Murder. From the twisted mind of Sean C. Baker, author of A Collection of Desires and Shadowplay in Book 1, Kim and Jesse, comes his most vicious novel yet, Murder Virus. Available where books are sold.